Today I'm going to be discussing solar power versus public utility grid systems, so stay tuned. Welcome folks, my name is Jerry Hanson. I'm the host of Pine Meadows Hobby Farm. I want to thank you guys for tuning in and listening to what I have to say on this subject. So I brought you over to Acorn Acres so I could stand on the site on which I originally set up my photovoltaic array, or the solar panels, to provide us with electricity while we were staying here at Acorn Acres. The only thing left here is this conduit that serviced the solar panels. And this is where they terminated, where I had my solar powered box that contained my battery bank and my charge controller. While it serviced my fifth wheel that used to be parked into this space, we lived here on this site for many years while we were getting back on our feet from being homeless. While I had my wind turbine mounted right here on this hill, which caught all of the wind coming off the meadow right here, and it was quite efficient. We had a combination of solar and wind power. So when I purchased Pine Meadows Hobby Farm, I uprooted the whole system and reinstalled it over at Pine Meadows Hobby Farm. My initial decision to purchase this solar powered package was born out of the need to have electrical power. We had a washer and dryer. Well, it was a propane dryer and then the washer, and we were using a 5,000 watt portable generator to supply our needs, but we could only use that for so many hours and had nothing at night except for what little 12 volt battery power we had available to us on the RV that we were living in. And then I was thinking about going solar, but trying to figure out how I was going to do it. So I started going online and researching photovoltaic options and seeing what was available out there on what I could purchase with what little money I was making at the time. One day came and we got a cash windfall. And it was enough for us to start the process of purchasing the solar package. Now the entire package was $16,000, but the initial cost was $12,000, which included the wind turbine. It included the guy wires for the mast, included the cost of the poles, the solar panels, the generator. Well, the generator wasn't included in the initial $12,000 feature, but that came later. And we also got the charge controller with the package and all the hookups that we needed to put the system together for the batteries, and the solar panels and the ridge or pole top mount solar panel mount system. The reason why we had to go solar is because our living in an RV up here on the ranch, the power company refused to supply us with the electric power we wanted to be able to plug into, because we were a portable system and they were unwilling to put in a meter head for us to be able to have our own independent power needs. So I had no choice but to resort to power. Now this show is answering questions. I've been having a couple of questions on going off grid series that I have on my YouTube channel. And the question is always, you know, the cost of solar versus grid, and solar seems to be too expensive. So I'm going to answer that question, and I'm going to give you guys some things to think about as I'm answering this question, because there's other YouTube channels that are attempting to answer this question too. Some of them are pro-solar, some of them are anti-solar, but I'm going to give you real data and also information to consider when you're deciding on going on grid or going on solar. So let's go back over to Pine Meadows Hobby Farm, and we'll continue this conversation around my solar panels and my system that I have set up over there. Okay, we're back at Pine Meadows Hobby Farm, and so I put this thing together twice. First time I put it together was over at Acorn Acres. Then I had to deconstruct the whole thing, take it apart, bring it over here and reassemble it, and I have an entire video series on assembling the photovoltaics over here, so check that out. Also, this show is about answering the question, is solar more expensive than power? Well, that depends. It depends on what you're thinking. Let me try to break it down for you in real numbers. Okay, I'll do it in our case and in another case. In our case, we had no choice but to go solar because, like I said, the utility company refused to hook us up to power, so we had no choice to invest $16,000 for power. Now, with that initial $16,000 investment, that's it. That's all the expense that we have, with the exception of maybe changing batteries out about every 15 years or so. And that's, you know, it's an expense, so that figure in, but I'm going by a 10-year period because that's how long we've had the system, and that's how the numbers I'm going to work with today. In that 10 years, we've had the under $16,000 investment into the whole solar package, which are the solar panels, the windmill, the generator, the batteries, the charge controller, etc. And then we have no monthly bills from that point on, which the utility company gives you monthly bills which are attached to fees and surcharges and all kinds of other crap that they put in there. So your cost actually goes up and up and up and up when you have utility grid power. Now, since we moved over here to Pine Meadows Hobby Farm, we now have grid power. The grid power is installed. It was here when we purchased the property, so therefore it was kind of sort of built into the cost of the property. But since I got the property at a deep discount, because now this one is an exception. This property I got for a fraction of the value of the cost of the land, which would otherwise sell on the retail market for another price, much higher price, and that would include the septic, the well, the power. But since we got it for such a significant discount, I could kind of factor in the power as being installed free, and maybe the well and the septic, and just basically I paid for the cost of the bare land itself. So I was privileged and honored to be able to find a piece of property with those things on them. So I really didn't need the solar power, but we have it. And now we have the option of going totally off-grid and not having a power bill, since I own it outright. And so with no power bill, that way it mitigates all of my out-of-pocket expenses for electricity. Now, for those of you who are purchasing property, like it's bare land, and you are weighing the option of putting in grid power versus solar power, this is probably the point of what most people are asking. So let's look at the figures. I did my research and I found out if I were to put in grid power, if I would have been able to put in grid power over at Acorn Acres in the site where we were parked, it would cost us upwards of $20,000 for the utility company to run the power line from the power pole up to the home site with installation of a transformer and meter head. That in and of itself would be half a mile. Okay, so the cost would vary depending on how far from an electrical source that you would have. In our case, it would be a half a mile. So I'm figuring in $20,000 initial costs, as opposed to $6,000 for this system, okay? Now, I would have to factor in the $16,000 for this system as opposed to $20,000 for that system. To keep the numbers accurate, monthly charges on this system are $0. Monthly charges on this system average about $120 per month. So factoring in the cost of grid utility power over a 10-year period, when you're paying a monthly bill of $120 multiplied by 12 months multiplied by 10 years, you're getting upwards of $34,400 for the grand total of a 10-year period. $34,400 for power for 10 years. This system, $16,000 overall cost. Now, I did all the labor myself to install it. The cost will go up if you have to hire somebody to do all the installation for you. Total cost of my solar panels and my whole solar package, $16,000 for 10 years. So $16,000 versus $34,400 in a 10-year period. To me, penciling it out is solar is cheaper. But for a system like this, which we run the generator on rare occasions, you've got to factor in the cost of how much it's going to cost you for propane over that 10-year period. So you throw in maybe another $250 in propane usage for 10 years. That's it, because that generator hardly ever needs to run, because we do primarily all of our usage during the daytime while the sun's up. Run the vacuum cleaner, do the wash, so the sun's providing the excess energy that we need. The battery bank will store the power for the night for us to use, maybe make a cup of coffee, heat something up quickly in the microwave, and run the 12-volt lighting. That's it. But in our house, we've retrofitted all the lighting to LED, so it's knocked the usage down altogether. And this system is big enough to run our house. It's 4,000 watts. The generator is 8,000 watts, so it's sufficient enough to charge the batteries and give us extra power we need, and power the well if we need it. Now here's where the cost starts equalizing, keeping it real, is in your from your 11th year to your 20th year, you're going to need to replace your batteries. So you're looking at maybe $3,500 for new batteries, depending on how many batteries you need, what type of batteries you buy, and how expensive those batteries are. And we're going to set about, I have 8 batteries in here, so it's going to cost me about $3,000 to supply my batteries. So the second 10 years is going to be equivalent to that of paying a power bill. But I don't mind buying new batteries every 10 years or 12 years or 15 years. It depends on the quality of battery we purchase and how well we maintain those batteries. That's a whole nother science and a whole nother video on battery maintenance, and we won't touch on that here. This is merely looking at the cost of grid versus solar and the different factors one has to weigh in to figure out which way do they want to go. Now, one advantage that I have for not being on grid was we didn't have power outages, because all of our lights were on battery backup, and as long as the batteries lasted, we had power. And lastly, there is those grid intertie systems where you do not have a battery backup, but your roof is full of solar panels and they feed directly into the grid. That's a whole nother system in and of itself, and I know very little about grid intertie systems. My system is not tied into the grid at all. It's completely independent, so I have a choice here at Pine Meadows Hobby Farm to either be on grid or off grid. Over at Acorn Acres, I had no choice. I had to be off grid. So this gives you guys some information to figure out if penciling out solar versus grid is advantageous to you, and it gives you more understanding on what you're factoring in. I'm your host, Jerry Hanson, here at Pine Meadows Hobby Farm and Acorn Acres. I want to thank you guys for coming and viewing my show. Please subscribe, give me a comment, click that bell icon that alerts you to new videos as I upload them, and also giving me a thumbs up. It really helps the channel. Sharing the videos really helps the channel also. You can follow us on social media. We're currently on Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, Reddit, Google+, Blogger. And I just launched on a couple of new ones. I can't remember the names of them yet, but I'll get that in future videos. We'll see you guys again in more videos. Bye-bye.